On this edition of Backroads, we travel along as family and friends gather near lodge grass to move animals onto summer range.
I can send them off in a direction and know that the job's going to get done.
Then we're off in search of a specific geographic point near Lewistown.
No, it's down here.
We'll discover some unique relics of Montana's gold mining history west of Melrose, and spend time with a Miles City woman who's maintaining her family's connection to the history of eastern Montana.
That's what makes us strong. That's how my children know who they are.
This episode of Backroads toots its own horn.
Backroads of Montana was made possible by the Greater Montana Foundation, encouraging communications on issues, trends, and values of importance to Montanans. By Travel Montana at visitmt.com, and by the University of Montana, where the discovery continues.
Well, it's beautiful with spacious skies, has amber waves of green, and has purple mountains majestic that rise up out of the plains. And all across America, from sea to shining sea, where the mountains and the prairies meet, is a place I need to be. Home is where Montana is my home. From mountain peaks to prairie lands, the places I have known. And I'm bound to ramble, yes, I'm bound to roam. And when I'm in off the road now, boys, Montana is my home.
Hello, I'm William Marcus. Welcome to another program in the Backroads series. We travel big sky country looking for interesting people we think you'd like to get to know, and unique places that make Montana life special. Today we're in Columbus, built along the north shore of the Yellowstone River as a trading post and stage stop about 1875. I want to look my best while I'm here in Columbus. Locals recommend I start with a visit to longtime barber, Bob Harsha.
Good morning.
Hi. Our first story takes us a few miles south of Columbus to Fishtail. There, Mike Larash is loading up his horse trailer and his gear and is heading out to round up livestock. But he knows it's a tough job he can't tackle alone. Horseman and trainer Mike Larash is about to spend all day in the saddle. Somewhere in this vast landscape are 200 head of stray cattle and a herd of half-wild mares that need gathering. Mike's going to need both of his top hands. That is, once he gets them in the saddle.
It's easier without your chaps.
Michaela and Elaney are Mike's daughters, two of this area's youngest, hard-ridingest, bulldoggingest buckaroos.
And there's some cows up on the hill and down by the shoreline. We're going to pick them all up and we're going to come through this gate. We're going to bring them all down in here.
And both are willing to cowboy up when there's work to be done.
And then while they're riding, they know what's going to happen before what happens. They're riding one step ahead of their horse.
For the entire Larash outfit, which includes Allie and Mickey's mother, Bobby, today will be a combination of work and fun, while also learning the ropes. 1,100 pounds on 4 hooves is a great lesson in control and confidence. It's the result of trust, teamwork, and communication.
You got that side, Mom?
As an integrative therapist, Bobby advises people. As a trainer, Mike advises horses and riders. It's only natural that Michaela and Elaney grew up appreciating the value of effective communication, from a quiet hoarse whisper,
"You're such a good girl, babe,"
to a galloping hoot.
"Come on, girls! Woo!"
They certainly understand their horses, Jessie and Babe.
Oh, yes, yes, yes.
As they work, they are keenly aware of one another.
And just communicating a lot. We've done it where we don't communicate, and it usually ends up in a wreck. And we're like, why didn't we communicate at that situation?
And then we have to go gather them all up and...
They seem to speak everyone's language. Mike and Bobby can't take all the credit for their daughter's cooperative work ethic and communicative skills.
Part of the girl's gift seems to come from a distant time and place. Great-grandparents Carmen and Gonzalo Morales followed their families to Montana from Mexico nearly 90 years ago. They met while working in the sugar beet fields east of Billings, and for over 50 years remained close to the land, to their faith, and to each other. Together, Carmen and Gonzalo raised 13 children, including Abby, Michaela and Eleni's grandmother.
My mom, she says, when I leave this earth, I want you to keep all of you kids to keep in touch, and always be brother and sister. Just be together, that's what I want of you kids.
4 generations and one hot afternoon later, Allie and Mickey are still honoring their great-grandmother's request. Out here, teamwork and communication are essential. If a colt slips past Allie, Mickey is there to pick it up. When a hole opens among the cattle, Allie can close it in.
Woo! I can't say enough of them. They're just wonderful little people. They're adults in little bodies.
It's easy to lose sight of the fact that Mickey and Allie are still young girls who occasionally bicker or try to avoid certain chores.
Cleaning your room.
Are you cleaning your room?
And it's a fact that each one is an individual. 11-year-old Eleni is driven and likes to set goals for herself.
To me, it's a project to want to go out and see what this horse has in store for me the next time I ride it or work with it or, whatever I'm doing.
9-year-old Michaela is artistic and attentive.
I tell her, Allie, you can't do it by yourself. You need help. Let me help you.
Getting along and talking through problems. For Allie and Mickey, it's a fundamental part of learning the ropes.
We're sisters. We're always going to be here. Why not just get along while we can, Because someday we may not have each other. But for now, we have each other.
By the end of the day, the cows are in the right pasture, the mares are safely out of the hills, along with 15 bashful foals that don't stray far. It seems everyone wants to be close.
And to know that they're also very joyful as having us as much as we are of having them. And it was just absolutely heartwarming. It touched my soul.
Maybe today's ride is best expressed in Michaela's art. It depicts a respect for the land, the horses, the cows, and her family, gathered in her own special corral. Grandmother Abby says that Allie and Mickey keep her young. They spend time together every day, often practicing Mexican recipes that have been handed down for 4 generations. Columbus barber Bob Harsha has been keeping people looking young for 60 years.
Yes, I bought the barbershop in 1946.
One of the earliest settlements in the Columbus area was a trading post named Sheep Dip. Later, sheep and cattle ranches were established north of the river and became the mainstay for the town. The Northern Pacific Railroad built a depot in 1882, naming it Stillwater. But after shipments were constantly misdirected to Stillwater, Minnesota, the town changed its name to Columbus. Sometimes on backroads, we might seem a bit misdirected, following wherever the road leads us. But in our next story, we're off in search of a predetermined location and a specific point in Montana. It's a story of intrigue, a little bit of detective work, and competing interests. Follow along as we get to the middle of this mystery. We've traveled to the friendly community of Lewistown, hoping to solve a mystery. We'll search around every corner. We'll sweep the streets. We'll work our shoe leather. We'll look harder than a one-eyed dog. We're checking just about everywhere. In this town, known for chokecherries, cowboy poetry, and a golden-domed courthouse, the signs are pointing us in every direction. We've been given 3 clues. Our first clue takes us to the Yogo Inn and the area around the swimming pool. This may be the place, the geographical center of Montana.
Well, as legend has it, in 1912, a gentleman mapped out the state of Montana. And as accurate as you could be back in 1912, he designated this as the center of the state of Montana.
The story goes that contractors dug up a time capsule when they were building on to the Yogo Inn. Local businessman Don Fow remembers what they found.
It had a cornerstone in it which showed where the center of Montana was, and that was right there at that spot.
The time capsule also had an old mining pan, a compass, a coin, a buffalo horn, and a document that told the story of the author's search for the center of Montana. The paper was signed with a WS. When the capsule was dug up, a Lewistown old-timer thought that the WS stood for Will Stafford, a pioneer surveyor with the Jawbone Railroad.
And he says that he had uncanny accuracy.
But the document also holds a warning.
He wrote, "For those of you who believe, great. For those of you who don't, to heck with all of you." Now, he used a little stronger language.
That curse hasn't deterred hundreds of tourists from taking a trip to the Yogo Inn each year to become members of the Center Mark Society. But our journey doesn't stop here.
I'll have the scrambler.
What kind of toast?
Our next clue takes us on the trail of Yogo Inn waitress Barb Ward, who remembers the center of the state being somewhere else.
Well, when I was younger, it was supposedly located at the top of Main Street Hill, and I went to school with a girl, her name was Kathy Dockery, and the center of Montana at that time was at their kitchen sink drain.
Order!
We drive up Main Street and to the top of the hill. The Dockery House once stood near where the First Christian Church stands today. Donna Ferdinand used to live in the house.
Well, my husband was called to be the preacher of this church, the Christian church here, and so we moved here, and we loved that big old house.
This story takes us back to the 1950s, when a national survey crew supposedly told Mrs. Dockery that her kitchen sink was directly over the center of the state. The Dockerys put up a plaque to celebrate the designation. Ferdinand tried to use the sink's honor to her advantage with her kids.
And we tried to con them into thinking that doing dishes in that sink was pretty special, but I don't think it made much difference to them.
And even though the Dockery house is now gone, the plaque remains and tells the story of the second of our possible center points. Journalist Jim Delente of the Lewistown News-Argus has heard all of the stories, the myths, and the legends about the center of Montana.
I consider myself the discoverer of the center of Montana.
Delente investigated all of the stories and found that they didn't quite add up.
I was told by the geologist that helped me find the exact spot that in order to find the exact spot, you would have to take Montana and make it flat, and then the exact spot would balance on a pin. That would be where the spot was for the center of the state. He did a lot of work on it, and when he finally got the answer, he called me and he said, "Guess where it is?" And you know, it came as kind of a shock.
With Delente's clues and our trusty global positioning system, we travel west of Lewistown to the King Colony Hutterite Ranch.
No, it's down here.
Rita Hofer and her friends and family take us out to a cow pasture to search for our next stop.
Jim from the Lewistown News-Argus calls me and he says, "Rita, do you know the center point is on your place?" I said, "No, we don't. We think it's in Lewistown." In from the gravel road. We said we can kind of pinpoint it where it's at if we go to our ASCS office and get our field maps. I remember that corner post there. I bet it's right in here. We came home, took a tape measure, and went out here and measured it off. And this is about the place where it's at.
Hofer says the colony is excited to have the center of the state on their land.
This is the last best place on earth. Montana. Central Montana. And then the center point of Montana.
So our quest to find the geographical center of Montana ends in a pasture, surrounded by hungry cattle, and looking up at the Moccasin Mountains as the sun sets over central Montana.
Will we ever know where the exact geographic center of Montana really is? Maybe that's something for each of us to determine on our own. So Bob, you used to cut hair in the Navy.
Yes, I did. I was aboard a carrier cutting hair. We had about 2,000 men aboard the ship and 3 barbers. and I cut hair for the rest of my Navy career. I enjoyed every day of it.
And you came back to Columbus in 1946 then?
Yes, in 1946 I came back to Columbus and went to work here, and I've been here ever since.
The Yellowstone River has cut a steep valley out of the sandstone layers that blanket the Columbus area. In 1896, a quarry began carving through the sandstone north of town. The quarry would become the main source of stone for the Montana State Capitol building and numerous state and federal buildings across Montana. One headstone of Columbus sandstone was shown at the St. Louis World's Fair. You can see it today at the Mountain View Cemetery. The Columbus quarry closed in 1910, but not before providing building blocks for many of the buildings on Pike Street. Whether built of brick or stone, the unique structures in our next story have withstood the test of time. Nestled between the steep walls of Canyon Creek, they may be the best kept secret on the Beaverhead Deer Lodge National Forest. For 100 years, form over function has defined the old beehive kilns up Canyon Creek near Melrose. They haven't been in use since 1905, but their distinctive shape still endures. It's a simple design that is deceptively complex. Long-forgotten craftsmen knew that a domed oven allowed the proper mix of heat and air necessary to turn wood into charcoal. Hot burning charcoal that the Hecla Mining Company needed to fire their 3 smelters down the hill in Glendale. Each kiln took 35 cords of wood, precisely stacked, first through the big charging door, then topped off through an upper door. Once lit, vents regulated the critical supply of air. Too little, and nothing happened. Too much, and everything went up in smoke. After 2 weeks of slow burning and constant attention, each kiln produced 1,800 bushels of charcoal, just enough to run 1 smelter for 2 days. In a single year, 3 square miles of trees would be stripped from the surrounding hillsides. This process repeated day and night for 20 years, until about 1900, when the ore played out and the smelters closed, but not before $20 million in silver bullion was obtained. All that's left of a labor-intensive enterprise are these kilns. They outlasted the mines, the smelters, the towns, and the families they made rich. This old flue is all that remains of one smelter. There's even less left of Glendale, a town that once boasted 1,000 residents. Today, Mountain Penstemon and Camas attend the kilns. The lodgepole pine and Doug fir returned, and in an ironic twist, threaten the kilns. Though probably not as much as weather and vandals. Both have taken their toll on these historic structures. In 2005, employees of the Beaverhead Deer Lodge National Forest and volunteers worked together to shore up and stabilize the old ovens. The kilns were later added to the National Register of Historic Places. 3 have been completely restored, so accurately they can almost function as they first did in 1881, sturdy enough to guarantee that their form will be with us for another 100 years. During shooting, our Backroads crew stayed 1 mile from the kilns at an old Forest Service Guard cabin. The cabin is picturesque, affordable, and except for plumbing and electricity, has all the comforts of home. Check with the Beaverhead Deer Lodge National Forest for details on rental. So, how's it look? Maybe now I'll fit in better at the new Atlas Bar, the most famous establishment in Columbus. Opened in 1906, the old saloon is filled with a cast of regulars. Some of them aren't going anywhere anytime soon. But we have one final stop on our Backroads journey. Our final story takes us to eastern Montana, where we'll meet a woman who's taken her family's history and used it to forge a strong connection to a place she now calls home.
And here's where it goes in. Recall that it went down the slough and it came over here like this?
Right.
Okay, so
Johnnie Thomas is excited to solve another mystery in her family's past.
Right.
North of the Yellowstone River, near an abandoned railroad bed.
Is anybody else just giddy with excitement like I am?
Along a gravel road, she's getting close to connecting her family with history and place.
Oh!
She's on Bruce Lockey's ranch near Miles City, and Johnnie's research reveals this used to be a place called Sadie, Montana. Her records indicate it was named after one of General Nelson A. Miles' black servants, Sadie Butler, a Thomas family member.
I cannot possibly tell you what this means to me.
This is all part of research for Johnnie's book, Growing Up Black in Montana. It documents the history between African Americans and eastern Montana. For Johnnie, the connection starts with her husband, Bill. Bill Thomas was born in 1929 in Miles City. Those were tough times on the south side of town, but a steadying force at home was his great-grandfather, Moses Hunter. He served as a buffalo soldier, which brought him to Montana. A former slave, he also fought in the Civil War. One day, young Bill rushed home from school to tell him what he had learned, that Abraham Lincoln freed the slaves. His great-grandfather's response changed his life.
Rose up in anger and slammed his fist onto the table and said, "Nobody freed me, sir. Nobody. I freed myself with a pitchfork and a gun. And don't you ever forget it, sir. Don't you ever forget it."
A short time later, Moses was gone. But those words, the message of creating your own opportunities, that stayed with Bill Thomas. The young man they nicknamed Bunky took those words to every job he held in Miles City, to every high school activity, and into every classroom. They served him well around the world, through a successful stint in the military, when he met his future wife, Johnnie, during a distinguished career in the Postal Service. The Thomases and their 3 children lived all over the country, but there were always special trips to Bill's hometown. Johnnie, a young woman from Tuskegee, Alabama, thought she was heading to a wild, uncivilized place.
And yet they thought of me as being the one who had grown up in poverty and deprivation and without an education. So they had equally lowered expectations for me. So it was, we sort of stared at one another open-mouthed as we're trying to understand one another's cultures.
As the kids grew older, they also learned about this special place that shaped their father's life. Oldest child, Eric, made the journey from Maryland to Montana.
As a child, there was an interest in making sure that I got a chance to spend a little time on a ranch and learn to ride and hold a rope in my hand. I didn't really learn to rope all that well.
But the significance of the place really hit home in February 1995, when Bill passed away and was buried in Miles City. Johnnie had a bench built in his honor, and his high school displayed it. He later received his hometown's highest honor, becoming the first African American inducted into the Range Riders Museum Hall of Fame.
It felt a bit like nobody could know how special my father was. But then I came here, and there are a lot of people that really did know how special he was, even though they really only knew him through high school.
Eric, who is a professional musician and teacher, visited the school that shaped his father's life, sat on the bench that honored his father's legacy, and played a song.
For him, this was home, and there were a lot of qualities about this place that made him who he was, and he definitely wanted to share those if he could.
With Bill gone and the children grown, Johnnie faced a choice about where to live. Her options: stay on the East Coast or move to a small town in eastern Montana.
I called the corporation and said, ship my furniture to Miles City, Montana. It was the best decision I have ever made in my life, because it began the new adventure, new people, new opportunities. Everything is an opportunity if you see it that way.
It wasn't easy at first. Johnnie threw herself into the community and local history, but she was stunned to hear the same name-calling her husband endured 60 years earlier.
And now even those people who, when I first came, called me nigger, pretty much we have gotten that, we've taken care of that in innovative ways. You like my horse?
She kept reaching out to the community. She made financial donations and gave this piece of art to the local community college.
Happy Independence Day!
And the city gave back, honoring Johnnie at the annual 4th of July parade. They sang songs and shared stories. It was another obstacle turned into opportunity for Johnnie. But nothing could prepare her for the harshest word she would ever hear. A cancer survivor, she went in for a routine checkup.
But then the doctor told me, your cancer is back and you're terminal. And it was like somebody had taken his fist and just thrown it into my belly. Oh my gosh.
In the Thomas family tradition, she refused to see it as an obstacle. It was a long road that Johnnie and the Thomas family traveled to get back to the place once known as Sadie, Montana. But what Johnnie and Eric already know, grandson William will soon find out. This is a family of survivors with a strong connection to a special place.
Johnnie Thomas hopes to have her book, Growing Up Black in Montana, ready for publication sometime in 2007. Well, thanks, Bob. That was a great haircut.
Thank you very kindly.
And that's our show. We'd like to thank Columbus barber Bob Harsha for all his time and talent, as well as Florence Carlson and Dennis Holton. If you have an idea for the Backroads program, drop us a line at the Backroads of Montana, the University of Montana, Missoula, Montana, 59812. And if you've missed any of the episodes in our series, you can check them out at your local city-county library across the state. As long as you keep watching, we'll keep covering the Backroads of Montana. I'm William Marcus. See you next time.
Backroads of Montana was made possible by the Greater Montana Foundation, encouraging communications on issues, trends, and values of importance to Montanans. By Travel Montana at visitmt.com, and by the University of Montana, where the discovery continues.
From mountain peaks to prairie lands, the places I have known. And I'm bound to ramble, yes, I'm bound to roam. And when I'm in off the road now, boys, Montana is my home. Coming in off the road now, boys, you know I'm heading